When this man saved a pregnant bear, he never expected to see her again. But 3 years later, she did something unbelievable. What are they doing here? Patrick thought to himself as he looked out the window. Since he came out in the morning, he had noticed several wild black bears roaming around on his property. One was standing right on his porch, looking at the front door as if it was waiting for him to come back. When he was much younger, Patrick had dealt with these predators before and knew just how deadly they could be when they got angry or hungry. So he was hoping that they would leave soon so that he could step out and go about his day. As Patrick watched them, he noticed that the predators didn't just come onto his property for the fun of it. They were moving around, actively searching the bushes and corners of the house. From his vantage point, he was certain that they were looking for something. Did a cub get lost? Patrick thought, because he wasn't certain what else would get them searching so intensely. Patrick also wondered if there was food or something outside that had attracted the wild bears. This filled Patrick's heart with a lot of confusion and fear. He knew that if the bears decided to come for him, there was no way he could fight all of them off. As Patrick pondered what to do next, a large black bear appeared in his line of view. It was the biggest in the group, and from the way the others reacted to it, Patrick was certain that it was the leader in some shape or form. He continued to stare at the bear, a hint of familiarity coming through. For some reason, it felt like Patrick had seen this bear before. Despite his better judgment, Patrick opened the door and stepped out of the house. He wanted to get a closer look, and a part of him knew that the bear wasn't going to hurt him. The creak of the door and his footsteps turned the bear's attention to him, but they made no attempt to attack him. The large bear continued to watch intently as Patrick came closer and moved forward in response. When he was able to get a better look at the bear, the memories of the day they met came flooding back. Patrick recalled walking in the woods 3 years ago with his dog, who was still a puppy at the time. This was something he tried to do regularly, and the cold winter morning didn't stop him from carrying out his usual routine. His walk usually included a pathway through the forest close to where he lived. Patrick was aware that there were bears in the forest and was often warned to be alert in case of an unfortunate interaction. But he had never encountered a bear and certainly didn't expect to come across one that winter morning. This was the time when bears were in hibernation, and he felt that the forest was perfectly safe. But as he took in the snowy landscape and the tall trees, Patrick noticed something that was almost unmistakable. It was a black bear, just a few minutes in front of him, and its black fur easily contrasted with the white snow. What is it doing out here? Instead of fear or confusion, a wave of worry washed over Patrick. He knew that something serious or terrible must have happened to the bear if it was in the middle of a pathway when it should be tucked away, hibernating. Patrick's puppy barked and didn't want to get too close to the bear, but Patrick couldn't bring himself to turn away unless he knew what had happened. When he got in front of it, the bear looked at him, but made no attempt to move or scare the man away. It looked nothing like the aggressive, menacing predator that it was. The black bear was tired and exhausted, and Patrick couldn't help but notice how hard it was trying to rest. Even though he looked at it, Patrick wasn't certain what had happened to the bear and decided to do what he could to help. He immediately returned home, and minutes later, arrived with fish and fruit. The bear was skeptical at first to receive help from a human, but soon ate and continued resting. Patrick looked for a way to provide the bear with enough water to drink, then gathered several bundles of hay to make a warm bed for the predator. Patrick also gathered whatever wood and branches he could find to make a shelter for the bear in order to protect it from the icy cold and wind. There was no one around to help him, and by the time he was done, it was almost evening and there was nothing more he could do. Patrick returned home and hoped that what he did was enough for the bear to survive and successfully fall into hibernation. He returned to the site a few days later, and by the time he got there, the bear was nowhere to be found. He was pleased with his discovery because this meant that his help gave the bear enough energy to move to a more suitable place to hibernate, and he hoped that it continued to be healthy and survive the winter. Patrick never expected to see the bear again, and over time, the encounter soon faded from his memory. If the bear had not come to his home, he probably would not have remembered it. The bear was much larger than Patrick remembered, which made it hard at first to recognize the animal. But as he stared straight at the bear, he was more than certain that it was the same one. Patrick still tried not to make any sudden movements, especially with the other bears still looking around. The bears were also starting to gather where Patrick was, as they were curious about what was happening. The other 3 bears were significantly smaller, and it didn't take long for Patrick to realize that the bear he had saved 3 years ago had now become a mother, and she came to introduce her offspring to the man who had saved her life. He stood in amazement, realizing that his good deed had not been forgotten. Even as the bear cubs approached him curiously, the mama bear didn't attack or scare Patrick off. Mama bears were usually very aggressive and dangerous when it came to protecting their young ones, but this one remained calm. This was a sign of how much that one kind act was enough to make the mama bear trusting of Patrick, enough to let her cubs around him. Patrick went to the back of his house and returned with some of the fish and fruit that he had kept there. Throughout the day, the mama bear and her cubs remained with Patrick, enjoying the treats he had to offer. As the day began to end, the bears returned to the forest, leaving Patrick with a huge smile on his face and wonderful memories. There was no other experience or interaction that brought him as much joy as the bears going out of their way to track and find him on his own. There are very few people who get to experience kindness from wild animals, and he could now count himself as one of them. This wasn't an experience he was ever going to forget, even if he never saw them again. However, this wasn't going to be the last time they met. Forming a bond with wild animals is difficult because of their predatory nature, but under the right circumstances, a beautiful bond can grow and thrive. The next day, when Patrick was about to go on a walk, he left his home only to find the bear and her cubs waiting for him outside. The cubs seemed more excited to see him again and immediately ran towards him and wrapped their arms around his legs. No matter what he did, Patrick couldn't shake them off, and they continued to stay around him as he completed the tasks around the house. In the weeks that followed, the bear continuously came to Patrick's home with her cubs actively in tow. His home had become a safe space for them, and they often spent a lot of time in the yard, playing and exploring the environment as the mama bear watched on. The bear cubs learned to climb the trees around his home and were very active and curious animals. Patrick soon realized that their visits were going to be a continuous thing, and he always had snacks and food waiting for them. He named the mama bear Selene, and when the cubs were tired and exhausted from playing all day, the two would often spend some time playing together as well. The more time they spent together, the more the cubs got interested in different aspects of Patrick's house and life. One thing that got their attention the most was his dog. This was the dog that had been with him when he rescued Selene. The dog still exhibited some level of fear and caution around Selene, and often tried to be there when Patrick was close to the bear, in order to prevent the man from getting hurt. Patrick was also worried about letting the bears get close to his pet, as he wasn't certain what form any interaction between the animals would take. But even though the dog was still skeptical around Selene, it quickly found common ground with the cubs. The cubs adopted the dog into their family, and the animals soon became fast friends. It was always an incredible sight for Patrick to watch as the cubs rolled on the grass, jumped around the dog, and eagerly included him in their activities. Patrick didn't just observe the bear cubs. He documented their every visit and took countless videos and pictures to mark the interactions. His friends and family were puzzled about the interaction, and any doubt about his story was quickly resolved when they took a look at the videos or came over to his home for a visit. Selene was used to being around Patrick at this point and made no move whenever his friends stopped by to see the bears for themselves. However, they always made a point not to get too close to the cubs in order not to upset her. A year after Selene and her cubs entered his life again, Patrick now considers them to be his family. The cubs had grown to be strong and independent and spent a lot more time in the forest. Once in a while, the bears would appear again, only to return back to the forest soon after. It was always sad for Patrick to see them go, but he knew that the forest was still their home, and it was time that they started learning how to fend for themselves instead of depending on their mother all the time. Patrick and Selene made a routine to continue to spend time together, and even when she doesn't stop by his home, they would always meet up at his favorite spot in the forest. His family encouraged Patrick to share the videos and pictures online, and he was amazed by the love and praise the videos received. Everyone who heard his stories and saw the wonderful interactions was excited to know that there was something like this out there. This encouraged Patrick to document their daily activities a bit more, and he has continued to share them on his social media pages. What an incredible story. Do you think Patrick should have encouraged their visits to his home? Share your thoughts in the comments, and see you in the next video.